The first thing I noticed was that she did not look at me. Every person who entered the training yard at Valdenmere looked at me. It was not vanity to say so. It was simply fact. I was the Alpha King of the Northern Highland Pack, and the great stone arena carved into the mountain's base was my territory, my authority made solid. The iron torches burned in their brackets along the walls. The gallery above was lined with War Council members and pack elders. The fighters below moved with the particular wariness of men who knew they were being observed. Everyone looked at me. She did not. She came in through the lower gate with a canvas satchel over one shoulder, a worn traveling cloak still carrying dust from the road, and her attention fixed entirely on the three men laid out on the recovery pallets along the arena's eastern wall. She moved to the first of them before the gate had even closed behind her, knelt, set the satchel down with the practiced economy of someone who had done this 10,000 times, and began her assessment without ceremony. Arland, my arena master, was still in the middle of his introduction. "This is the field mender the Eastern traders recommended," he said, with the particular tone he used for things he found mildly amusing. "Travels with the trade circuits. Offers wound treatment at the waystation markets." He paused, looking at where she had already begun unwrapping a compress on the second fighter's shoulder. "She has apparently handled some difficult cases." From the gallery above, I heard Councillor Bren make a sound not quite a laugh, but the shape of one. "A market healer, in Valdenmere's arena." "The fighters needed someone," I said. "Our healer is 2 weeks from returning. These men need treatment now." "Of course, my king." Bren's voice was smooth, unbothered. "I only note the contrast." Below, she had moved to the third man, a fighter named Doran, who had taken a bad fall 3 days ago and had not been improving. I watched her press 2 fingers to the side of his neck, then to his wrist, then lay her palm flat against the area of the injury with a steadiness that had nothing performative about it. She was simply working. Something in my chest went quiet. I had not felt quiet in a long time. 7 years since the mate mark on my wrist had shown any warmth at all, 7 years since I had stopped waiting for it to mean something. The pack knew I had given up on the bond. I had given up more quietly than they knew. It had not been a decision so much as an erosion. One season, then another, the mark cold and still, and eventually I had stopped waking in the night to check it. The quiet in my chest was probably nothing. Probably the stillness of the arena, the iron torches, the rare absence of my own thoughts running their habitual routes. I looked away from her. "Resume the morning session," I told Arland. He did. The fighters returned to their work. The council talked quietly in the gallery above, and from the corner of my eye, for the next 2 hours, I watched her work on those 3 men with a focus that did not waver once. She was still there when the session ended. Her name was Marin. I learned it from Arland's report that evening, along with the summary of what she had done for Doran, had identified a secondary injury the pack's own healers had missed, had repositioned his treatment accordingly, and had left specific instructions for his overnight care. Arland delivered this information with the careful neutrality he used when he was surprised, and did not wish to show it. "She'll return tomorrow?" I asked. "She agreed to stay 3 days, my king. She said Doran requires monitoring and that she doesn't leave cases mid-treatment." I found that interesting. Not the competence I had already suspected from watching her. The part that interested me was the refusal to leave mid-treatment as though she were being asked to abandon someone. She had known those men for 3 hours. She spoke of them as cases she was responsible for. "Pay her for a week," I said, "whatever she asks." Arland blinked. "She hasn't asked anything yet." "Then ask her what she needs and give it to her." He went. I sat with my evening reports and thought about the quiet in my chest, and then I put it away deliberately, the way I had learned to put things away, and I read until the torches burned low. The second day she arrived, before the morning session began. I was already in the gallery when she came through the lower gate. She did not know I was there yet, I thought, though I would later revise that assessment. She went to the recovery pallets first, checked Doran, made a small adjustment to his wrappings, spoke a few quiet words to him. Then she set up her satchel at the edge of the yard and settled in to watch the session's opening drills. I watched her watch. She had a way of observing that reminded me of experienced fighters, not moving her head much, taking everything in through a wide, still attention. When one of my fighters, a big man named Tavar, came out of a pivot badly and landed a shoulder wrong, she was on her feet before the drill master had registered the problem. She said nothing, did not move into the yard, simply stood at the edge of the work area with her satchel ready, watching. When the drill master waved off the injury as minor, she sat back down. 20 minutes later, Tavar was unable to raise his arm above his shoulder. Arlen directed him to her. She examined him, spoke to him briefly, and then, I saw this from the gallery, she turned and looked directly up at me. I had not realized she had known I was there. "He needs to come out of rotation for 3 days, she said. Her voice carried well in the stone space. "If he continues now, he'll lose range of movement permanently." The gallery had gone still. Counselor Bren was looking between me and the woman in the yard below with an expression that was somewhere between amusement and calculation. "She presumes to advise the Alpha King on training decisions," Bren murmured to the elder beside him. "She advised me on a medical decision," I said, loud enough that everyone heard. "Those are different things." I looked down at the yard. 3 days, Tavar, do what she says." Tavar, who was a proud man and normally argued everything, looked at her for a moment. "Yes," he said. "My king." Later that afternoon, during the break period, I descended from the gallery for the first time. I told myself it was to speak to Arlen about the afternoon schedule. I went to the eastern wall instead. She was repacking her satchel. She glanced up when I approached, and then went back to what she was doing, not disrespectfully, simply as a person who was mid-task and intended to finish it. I stopped a few feet away and waited, which was not something I did often. "Doran's inflammation is responding," she said, without looking up. "If it continues this way, he should be able to resume light movement in 5 days. I'll know more by tomorrow evening." What did my healers miss? She paused, considered, and then answered with the straightforwardness I was already coming to expect from her. The primary impact was obvious. The secondary injury was underneath it, the kind you find only if you look for it rather than treating what presents first. She closed the satchel's top flap. "They're not bad healers. They were in a hurry and it was a busy day." She was protecting them. She was also telling me they had been careless, but she was doing both at once, with an even-handedness that required neither apology nor performance. "You travel the eastern circuits," I said. "Among others." "Alone." She looked at me then, direct, unhurried, the way she had looked at the fighters when she was assessing something. "Mostly." I did not say what I was thinking, which was that she was too capable to waste on waystation markets, that whatever she was moving away from or toward on those circuits was her own business, that I found I wanted to know it anyway. I said none of it. "If you need anything during your stay," I said, "tell Arlen." "Thank you." She held my gaze for a moment. Then she looked back at her satchel, found something she'd been looking for, and nodded once to herself, apparently, and went back to work. I stood there for 3 seconds longer than I needed to before I went to find Arlen. By the end of the second day, she had treated 9 fighters. She had been brought in for 3. The others came to her in the way that wounded people find someone who actually looks at them, quietly, without ceremony, one at a time. A man with a knee problem he had been working around for a month. Another whose hands had been rewrapping too tight for so long he had lost sensation in 2 fingers. A young fighter, barely past his first year of training, who had a headache he had not reported because he thought it would mark him as soft. She treated the knee. She unwrapped and rewrapped the hands, showing the man how to do it himself. She sat with the young fighter for a while, asked him questions, determined the headache was a neck strain from poor sleeping position, and showed him 2 adjustments to his rest posture. He left looking slightly stunned, as people do when a problem they have been bearing quietly turns out to have a simple cause. I watched all of it from the gallery. Counselor Bren watched me watching. "She's good with them," he said beside me, in the tone of a man noting an unexpected inconvenience. "Yes," I said. "A capable field mender is a useful thing." He paused. "Still, a market traveler treating Valdenmir's warriors. It raises questions about the standard of our own medical staff." "It raises questions," I agreed, "about whether we have been paying enough attention to what our fighters needed." Bren had nothing to say to that. I was aware that I was being uncomfortably direct, which I also was not normally. The quiet in my chest had been there all day. I had stopped trying to name it. It was on the 3rd morning that the War Council made their move. I did not sanction it, which they knew. But Bren was old, and old men with status often confuse tolerance for permission. When I arrived at the gallery for the morning session, I found that Arland had been replaced at the Yard Center by a senior training master named Keth, a man who had been Bren's ally for 20 years and who had a particular gift for making people feel small in public. Marin was already in the preparation hall adjacent to the arena. I could see through the connecting door that she was laying out her morning supply of treatment materials. Keth stood at the door's threshold. "The council has arranged a consultation," he announced, with the carrying voice of a man who wanted an audience. "Since the field mender is treating our fighters, it is appropriate for us to understand her qualifications. She'll demonstrate her methods on the fighter currently in the preparation hall." The fighter in the preparation hall was a man named Vren. I knew Vren. The whole pack knew Vren. He was Valdenmir's most volatile fighter, not cruel precisely, but volatile in the way of a man with very bad mornings and very little patience, who had been known to put 3 training partners against the wall before his temper settled. He was having a bad morning. I could see it in his posture from 20 feet away. The intent was clear. Put her in a confined space with Vren's volatility, wait for her to flee, and use the flight as evidence that she was not qualified to treat warriors. I was halfway to the gallery stairs before Arland caught my eye. He gave me a very slight shake of his head. Then he looked toward the preparation hall. I stopped. She was already in the room. She had seen Vren, I could tell by the single beat of stillness in her movement, the one assessment, and then the deliberate continuation of what she was doing. She kept laying out her materials. She did not look at Keth. She did not look at Vren. She spoke to him. I could not hear the words from where I was. What I could see was this. She said something brief quietly while keeping her hands busy with her materials. Vren's posture shifted, not dramatically, not immediately, but the way something shifts when it finds an unexpected surface to rest against. She said something else. He crossed his arms, still tense, but the particular forward lean of a man about to escalate had eased. She was not soothing him. I understood this somehow from 20 feet and no audible words. She was not managing his temper or coaxing him or making herself smaller to give him room. She was speaking to him as a person who was clearly in pain, physical pain, I realized, watching, and she was naming it. He sat down on the preparation bench. The corridor outside the preparation hall had gone very quiet. Keth was still standing at the threshold, but his expression had shifted into something that had no plan behind it. She examined Vren's shoulder, the left one, which I had watched him favor for 2 weeks, and spoke, and he answered, and she spoke again. 10 minutes later, she came out of the preparation hall with a list of materials she needed from the storage room, and handed it to the nearest aide without looking at Keth at all. "He has a partial tear," she said, to the air between Keth and the aide. "He's been training on it for at least a month. He'll need 4 weeks off rotation and specific exercises. I'll write them out. She went to get the materials. Keth said nothing. In the gallery above, I could see Bren's jaw working silently. I had not moved from where Arland had stopped me. My wrist was warm. I looked down at it. The mate mark, a tracery of old silver-gray lines on the inside of my left wrist, 7 years cold, was not flaring. Not yet. It was simply warm, like stone that has been in sunlight for a long time. I had forgotten that it could feel like that. That evening she came to my study. She had not been invited, but she had apparently told Arland she wanted a few minutes of the Alpha King's time to discuss Doran's progress, and Arland, who was a perceptive man, had shown her in. I looked up from my desk when she entered, and she stood in the doorway with the same quality she had in the arena. Present, unhurried, not quite comfortable but entirely unafraid. Doran's inflammation has reduced significantly, she said. He can likely return to light training in 4 days rather than 5. I wanted you to know before I updated Arland's report. Thank you, I said. I had not told myself I was going to say what I said next, but I said it. Sit down if you like. She considered this, then sat in the chair across from my desk, with the deliberateness of someone who was accepting an offer rather than taking something. She set nothing down. She had her cloak on still, as if she had not quite decided whether she was staying. Vren, I said. Partial tear of the posterior capsule. He's been bearing it well, too well. That kind of stoicism makes the injury worse. He trusted you. She was quiet for a moment. He was in pain and someone noticed. That doesn't require trust so much as a moment's relief. Most of the people who have tried to treat Vren have not gotten him to sit down voluntarily. I didn't ask him to sit. I told him he looked like someone who was handling more than he should have to and asked where it was worst. People generally answer that question. She looked at me steadily. The council set that up to embarrass someone. I assume it wasn't really about Vren. No, I said, it wasn't. I don't embarrass easily. Not a boast, a fact, delivered like the others. And I wasn't going to leave him in pain because someone wanted to use his volatility as a prop. I looked at her across the desk. The torches in the study were lower than the arenas, warmer, more amber. My wrist was still warm. I put my left hand flat on the desk deliberately and did not think about why. You travel the eastern circuits, I said again, because I had not asked what I wanted to ask the first time. Why? She was quiet for a longer moment this time. I'm good at it. That's not a reason, that's a description. Something in her expression shifted, not quite a smile, but the neighborhood of one. I had a home once. It stopped being one. The circuits suit me. I know where I am on them, I know what I'm for. She paused. That's the most honest answer I have. It's a good answer, I said. She looked at me then, and I became aware, in the particular way that you become aware of things you have been not looking at, that she was not incurious about me. She was watching me with the same still, wide attention she used in the arena. It was not deferential. It was not calculated. It was genuine attention, which I received so rarely that I had difficulty identifying it. You stopped believing in something, she said, not a question. My wrist was warm. Most kings are practical about these things eventually, I said. Practical, she repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it slightly off. She stood then, which I had not expected. I was accustomed to people waiting for dismissal. Thank you for your time, my king. Kaelin, I said. I did not know why I said it. She paused at the door, looked back over her shoulder. Marin, she said, which was information I already had and somehow still needed. Then she left. I sat alone in my study with my left hand flat on the desk, watching the warmth in my wrist, and did not move for a long time. The morning of the 4th day, the day she had not originally planned to be in Valdenmere at all, was a match day. Match days in Valdenmere were not tournaments. They were evaluation bouts, structured contests between the pack's senior fighters to assess conditioning, technique, and readiness for the border rotations. The gallery filled early. The council was there, the pack elders, the training masters. The arena floor was cleared and chalked, and the fighters moved through their warm-up sequences with the particular focus of men who knew they were being judged. Marin was in the recovery area. She had set up there quietly before the gallery filled, and I noted from my position at the gallery's rail that she had positioned herself with a clear sightline to the arena floor. She was watching with that wide, still attention. The bouts began. The first 3 went cleanly, no injuries beyond the ordinary. The gallery was in good spirits, the fighters were performing well. Counselor Bren was relaxed enough to make small jokes with the elder beside him. I watched the bouts and I watched Marin and I felt the warmth in my wrist, and I kept all of these things in their separate compartments the way I had learned to. In the 4th bout, a fighter named Aset, young, fast, highly regarded, came out of a scramble badly and went down hard. There was nothing extraordinary about it at first. Fighters go down hard. The crowd noise dipped in that reflexive way, a collective held breath, and then began to recover as Aset moved. He pushed himself up. He had one hand on the arena floor, and one hand pressed against his side. The hand on his side was wrong. Not wrong the way a bruise is wrong. Wrong the way the body looks when something interior has been damaged by an impact and has not yet declared itself fully, but is about to. I had seen enough fighters in my years to know the difference. I was on my feet before I had decided to stand. Marin was already moving. She had come to the arena floor gate. The gate was latched, no unauthorized entry during a bout, match day protocol. She had her hand on the latch. She was looking at Aset. The drill master was moving toward the fighter but slowly, reassured by the movement. The pack's secondary healer, who was stationed in the gallery for match days, was looking at Aset and looking at his notes and frowning but not moving. She opened the gate. Matchday protocol was clear. No entry without the arena master's authorization. Arland had not authorized entry. The crowd noise dropped again, this time differently, not the reflexive held breath of an injury but the sharp attention of an unexpected thing. She walked into the ring. She walked in with nothing dramatic about it. No running, no urgency in her face, just the pace of someone who has calculated how much time she has and is using it correctly. She went directly to Aset, who had gone still in the way of a man who has realized the something wrong has gotten larger, and knelt beside him. The gallery was silent. I stood at the rail. My left wrist had gone from warm to burning. I looked down at it. The mate mark on my wrist, 7 years of gray and cold, 7 years of a dead hope I had stopped mourning, was glowing. Not warmly, not ambiguously. Glowing. The silver-gray lines had deepened into something between white and gold, pulsing with a steadiness that matched my heartbeat, and the heat was not pain. It was recognition, which is a different thing entirely, and I had been a boy the only other time I had felt it, and I had forgotten how total it was. The gallery had seen it. Several people had already grabbed the arms of the people beside them. The murmur that went through the stone space was not loud. It was the sound of a crowd that has just witnessed something they will describe for the rest of their lives, and has not yet found words for it. Below, Marin was working on Aset with quick, certain hands. She had not looked up. She did not know about the mark yet. She was simply doing what she had walked into the ring to do. "She's in the ring during a match," Keth said, from somewhere to my right, reflexive outrage finding words before thought. "Protocol is secondary to a man's life," I said. My voice was very even. The burn in my wrist was extraordinary. "Be quiet." Keth was quiet. Bren was quiet. The entire gallery was quiet. Arland had come to stand beside me. He looked at my wrist, then at Marin in the ring below, then at me. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. She worked for 6 minutes. Later, I would learn that Aset had sustained an internal impact that would have become critical within another 12 to 15 minutes, survivable with treatment, but the window would have closed. She stabilized him, called for a stretcher with a few words to the drill master who had finally reached the ring's edge, and supervised the carryout with the focused efficiency of someone conducting a field evacuation. When Aset was clear of the ring, she stood. She looked down at her hands for a moment, not, I thought, with self-congratulation, but simply the way healers look at their hands when a crisis has resolved, taking inventory of what they have just done. Then she straightened and looked up at the gallery. She looked at me. I held up my wrist. The mark was visible from where she stood. I made sure of it, turned my wrist so the glow caught the arena's torchlight, so there was no ambiguity in what she was seeing or what it meant. Maren looked at the mark for a long moment. Then she looked at my face. The gallery was still silent. 200 people, and the only sounds were the torches and the breath of the crowd, and somewhere in the recovery area, the quiet voice of someone attending to Aset. She looked at me for a long time. Long enough that I became aware of it as a choice. She was deciding something, or perhaps she had already decided and was simply taking the time to be certain of herself. Then she walked to the center of the ring. "I believe," she said clearly into the silence, "that mark is mine." It was not a challenge. It was not a question. It was the same quality as everything she said, a fact, observed and stated, delivered with the steadiness of a woman who had spent years knowing what was hers and what was not, and was very certain about the difference. The gallery let out a sound. I would not call it a collective exhale. It was larger than that, a sound that had weeks of tension in it, questions the pack had been carrying since she walked into the yard 4 days ago, and something that was almost joy, which surprised me. I was already moving. I did not take the stairs from the gallery to the arena floor at a dignified pace. I went quickly, and I did not care who saw it, and when I came through the arena floor gate, I crossed the chalked ground to where she stood, and I stopped in front of her. Up close, I could see that she was entirely composed. Her breathing was slightly elevated from the work she had just done, and her hands had a fine tremor that would settle the aftermath of concentration, not fear. She was looking at me with that direct, unhurried gaze. I held out my left hand, wrist up, the mark between us. "Yes," I said, "it is." She looked at the mark for a moment. Then she reached out and laid her hand over it, palm flat against my wrist, exactly as she had laid her hand on the fighters she was assessing, and the mark flared so brightly that the stone walls reflected it, and the warmth went from my wrist through my arm and into my chest, and filled the place that had been quiet for 4 days and cold for 7 years. Around us in the arena, the silence broke, not into noise but into movement. One fighter went to a knee, then another, then the ones in the recovery area and the training masters, and the young fighters in the corridors who had pressed close to the gate to see what the silence meant. 200 warriors in Valdemir had never bowed to a woman. I knew this, because I had been alpha for 12 years and a warrior for 20 before that, and it had never happened. They bowed. Not because I commanded it, I had said nothing. Not because of protocol or instruction. Because the mate mark of the Alpha King of Valdemir had been cold for 7 years and was burning now, and because the woman it had named had walked into a ring without armor or weapon to save a man's life, and because something about that was older than protocol, older than the War Council's opinions, older than Bren's careful politics and Keth's careful rules. Destiny, when it decides to make itself known, is not subtle. Bren found me afterward. He found me in the corridor between the arena and the main keep, where I had stopped to have a moment before the day's demands found me. He came alone, which told me something. Alone meant conversation, not politics, or politics of a different kind. "My king," he said. "Counselor." He was quiet for a moment. In the long years of his council service, I had seen Bren manage many situations, and he was skilled at it, skilled enough that I had learned to watch his silences as carefully as his words. This silence was the particular one of a man revising. "I was wrong about her," he said finally. He said it plainly without decoration, which was the most I could have asked. In how I treated the situation, in what I assumed. "Yes. The pack will need some." "The pack knelt," I said. "The pack has already decided." Another silence. He nodded. "The young fighter," he said. "Aset, he'll recover." Marin says fully, "A month." Bren looked at the wall for a moment. Then he looked at me. "She called him hers before the entire arena," he said, and there was something in his voice, not quite admiration, but its functional equivalent, the sound of a practical man recognizing that something has happened that changes the landscape, and there is no practical response to it but adjustment. In front of 200 warriors. "Yes," I said. "Remarkable woman." "Yes," I said, "she is." He inclined his head and left. I watched him go. The corridor was empty now except for two of my personal guards, far enough away to give me room. I stood with my left hand at my side, and the mark still warm against my wrist, not the burning brightness of the arena, but settled now into the steady warmth of a thing that had found its rightful state. 7 years of cold, and it had known her in 4 days. I wondered sometimes, in the years that followed, what would have happened if Bren had not arranged the preparation hall test, if Vren had not sat down for her, if the council had not underestimated her consistently enough that she had no occasion to demonstrate what she was, whether the mark would have found its moment some other way, some quieter turn in an empty corridor or a shared evening at a study desk. I suspected it would have. Destiny is not easily deterred. But the arena had been better. The arena had been the truth of her, not performed, not staged, not arranged. She had walked into the ring because a man was dying and she could help him, and she had not calculated anything beyond that, and the mark had answered not the calculation but the truth underneath it. That was the thing I held on to. She did not leave Valdenmere. I did not ask her to stay. I offered once formally, in the way of a man who is not practiced at asking for things for himself and has chosen transparency over cleverness. I told her what the mark meant, what it would mean for the pack, what it would mean for me. I told her what she would be taking on, because she deserved to understand it fully, and I told her that the circuits were still there if she needed them, that the choice was entirely hers, that I would not use the bond as leverage. She listened to all of it. When I finished, she said, "I know what a mate mark means." I wasn't sure. "I've been a field healer for 11 years, she said, with the mild exasperation of a very competent person being underbriefed. "I know what a mate mark means. I know what it feels like when one answers." She paused. "I felt it too, from the preparation hall. I thought you should know that." I had not known that. I had wondered, but I had not known. "I stayed today," she said, "because Doran needed monitoring and Aset needed stabilizing and Vren's exercise regimen needs to be written out properly or Arlen will misinterpret it." She looked at me steadily. "I'll stay tomorrow because there are 11 other fighters I'm in the middle of treating. I'll stay after that because—" She paused, and for the first time in 4 days something in her composure found an edge, a single moment of something that was not quite certainty. Then it settled. "Because this feels like the end of something I didn't know I was waiting to be done with." I understood that. I understood it more completely than almost anything she had said. "All right," I said. "All right," she said. It was not the claiming that happened in old stories. No ceremony, no great speech, no crown placed on her head in front of the cheering pack. That came later in its own time, properly prepared and properly witnessed, and it was everything it should have been. But this was the moment I came back to, in the years that followed. The two of us in my study, the torches low, her traveling cloak still on because she had never quite stopped being someone who was ready to leave, and then the single moment when she took it off and set it on the chair beside her. She had decided. I had stopped being a man who did not believe in what the mark was trying to tell him, and she had stopped being a woman for whom home was a thing that happened elsewhere. And between those two stopped things there was a space, and we were in it. The pack learned her quickly. Not as a ceremony, as a presence. She did not retreat from the recovery pallets when the mate bond became known. She was in the arena the next morning in the same way she had been every morning, and the fighters, who had watched her walk into the ring the day before, treated her with a directness that was somewhere between respect and relief. Warriors are practical about their healers. She was their healer in a way that the pack's official appointment had nothing to do with. She had earned it in the ring, in Vren's preparation hall, in 12 minutes with a fighter named Doran who had been steadily getting worse before she arrived. Vren sought her out on the 3rd day of his restricted rotation. I was in the corridor when it happened and heard the exchange second-hand from Arland. Vren had come to ask, straight-faced, whether his exercises were, quote, actually going to help or whether she was just keeping him busy. She had apparently told him they were going to help if he did them correctly, that she would know if he was doing them incorrectly, and that if he wanted she could show him exactly which motion was causing the most strain so he could verify for himself that the exercise addressed it. He had said yes, and she had shown him, and he had done the exercise correctly the first time and not said anything but had come back the next day to show her the second one. Arland told me this story in the way of a man who found it genuinely delightful. I found it genuinely delightful too, which was not a thing I had expected to feel regularly. It turned out to be a thing I felt regularly. There was an evening, perhaps 3 weeks after the arena, when I found her at the recovery room window after the evening session. The recovery room in Valdenmir's arena faced west, which meant that at the end of the day the long light came through the iron-grilled window and laid itself across the stone floor in a particular way. She was standing at it with her notes in hand, not reading them, watching the light. She heard me come in. She did not turn. "Tavar's shoulder is almost fully recovered," she said. "Another week." "I know," I said. "You told Arland this afternoon." A pause. "I did," she turned. "I was thinking about Aset. He's doing well." "I know. I was thinking about the moment before I went in." She looked at me directly, the way she always did. I knew I might not be able to get back out in time if the drill master closed the gate behind me. Matchday protocol. I would not have let that happen. "You were at the gallery rail," she said, not unkindly. "I was at the gate. There wasn't time to wait for authorization." She was quiet for a moment. "I wasn't frightened. I want you to know that. I know what I'm doing in a medical emergency, and I know when someone needs me in a ring more than I need to stay safely outside it." "I know," I said. "I was watching." "I know you were." She looked at the window, at the light on the stone floor. "I want you to know something else." I waited. I have spent 11 years on the circuits because I am good at what I do and the work is real, and I did not know where else to put myself. She looked at me. I knew what the mark meant when I felt it in the preparation hall. I knew what I was walking toward. A pause, quiet and certain. I walked toward it on purpose. The warmth in my wrist, which had not left since the arena, would never be cold again, settled into my chest. "I know," I said again, because it was true, and because sometimes the truest things are also the simplest. She nodded. Then she went back to her notes, and I sat down at the room's work table with the evening's reports, and we spent the hour in the quiet way of two people who have found the place they fit, and are learning the particular ordinary piece of it. Aset was on his feet in 3 weeks, as she had predicted. On the day he returned to light training, he went to her before he went to the drill master. I watched from the gallery. He had something in his hands, a small folded thing, which he gave to her with the awkwardness of a young man who is not accustomed to expressing gratitude and has decided to do it anyway. She took it, looked at him, and said something that made him stand taller. Later I asked her what he had said. He said he was sorry for the fuss, she told me, as if nearly dying was an inconvenience he'd caused on purpose. She shook her head. I told him to focus on his footwork and not pivot left until the knee was fully settled. And the thing he gave you. She held it up, a small carved token, a rough wolf's shape in pale wood, fighter-made clearly, not skilled work, honest work. He made it during his recovery, she said. He had time. She put it in her satchel, which was no longer a traveling satchel so much as a working one. It had acquired a permanent hook inside the arena's treatment room door, and it hung there between sessions rather than being carried in and out with the doors cold close each evening. Small changes, the kind that happen gradually and then are simply true. The formal ceremony was held on the 40th day of her stay, as tradition required. The great hall of Waldenmeer, not the arena. The arena had already held the moment that mattered, and this was for the record, for the pack's memory, for the forms that bind. She wore the blue-gray of Waldenmeer, which suited her in a way I had expected because I had already learned to expect that most things suited her. She stood at the hall's center with the same stillness she had in the ring, the same unhurried presence, while the pack's elders said what elders say, and the pack witnessed what packs witness when their alpha king finds his mate. Bren was there, in his correct place, in his correct robes. He performed his portion of the ceremony correctly. When it was done, and the thing was sealed and the hall full of warm pack noise, he came to stand beside her for a moment and said something I could not hear. Later she told me. He had asked how long she had known, and she had said from the preparation hall, and he had been quiet for a moment and then said, "Good instincts." "High praise," I told her. "I thought so," she said. I think about the mark sometimes, how it sat cold on my wrist for 7 years while I convinced myself I was being practical about it. How it woke, not with thunder, not with a ceremony or a moonlight or anything that announced itself, but with the warmth of stone that has been in sunlight for a long time, in a stone arena, watching a woman who had not looked at me look at a wounded man. She never expected to be found. That was the thing about the circuits. They had suited her because she did not believe in places where she was meant to be. She had stopped believing in that the way I had stopped believing in the mark. We were, in that way, exactly what the other needed. She walks the arena most mornings now before the fighters arrive, a habit I noticed in the first week and have never interrupted. She goes through the treatment room, checks her supplies, walks the recovery area, and stops for a moment at the window that faces west. It is dark in the mornings, so she is looking at nothing, probably, or the darkness itself, or some internal accounting I have never asked her to explain because I do not need to. It is hers. When she comes back in, the mark is warm. I do not think about the 7 years very often anymore. There is no point in it, and she would say something brisk and accurate about the futility of counting what was cold before the warmth arrived. She would be right. She is usually right, and on the few occasions when she is not, she acknowledges it with the same straightforwardness she acknowledges everything else, and we move on. Vren's shoulder healed fully. He brought her a second carved token at the end of his recovery, a larger one, better made, because he had apparently been practicing. He did not explain it. She did not ask him to. The pack does not bow to her every dawn, the way the old stories say the scorned woman is finally cherished. They treat her as what she is, a healer who walked into the ring when others hung at the rail, who looked at a volatile man and saw pain instead of volatility, who laid her hand over a cold mark and woke 7 years of waiting with one touch. She does not need ceremony. She has the work, and the window, and the satchel on its hook, and Osset's carved wolf on the treatment room shelf. She has the mark, which is mine, and she is entirely correct that it is hers. She called him hers in front of the arena, and the arena bowed, and she was right. She was right about most things. I learned this early and I have not forgotten it.